So, who we got? Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Natural Resource Committee for September 6th, 2:00 p.m. If we could please rise for Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, we need to make sure we did the public notice of this meeting was published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, correct? All right, excellent. And I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I will make that motion.
We have a second. We have two members online. Someone like to second it?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
All right, thank you, Councilman McAllen, for second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the minutes from August 15th. Do we have any changes to those minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
I have,
Second that?
thank you, Councilman McAllen. We have the second. All right, without objection, those minutes are approved.
Okay.
All right, at this time, we have citizens' comments. I'd like to remind everyone that during this period of time, we have 3 minutes each per person for a total of 15 minutes. And we can address the council committee in a respectful manner appropriate to the decorum of the meeting, refraining from the use of profane, abusive, or obscene language. Do we have any public comment? Yes, ma'am. If you'll say your name for the record.
Kate Schaefer with the Open Land Trust and commenting on agenda item number 7 with respect to the green space penny language. I assume this is the appropriate time. I apologize, I'm going to read from my phone because I left them on my desk. But the good news and the takeaway, oh, thank you, saved the day. Hats off to your team for preparing this process document. I think at record speed and relying on a lot of great information. We have a track record of success, as you all know, with the Rural and Critical Program, locally, regionally with the Charleston Greenbelt Program, and statewide with the Conservation Bank. And I think the ordinance to establish the Beaufort County Green Space Program before you should give taxpayers a lot of comfort and enthusiasm that their dollars will be well spent should they be employed or supported and employed. So providing some comments to you all, including strengths and improvements. I just want to highlight a couple of things. First and foremost, the purpose language, I think really zeroes in well on the growth management need for the financial incentive, which I know has been part of the urgency for this penny, because it talks about land protected with conservation easements or fee simple purchases when threatened by the development with detrimental impacts on traffic, public safety, stormwater, water quality. These are the things we're learning about the balance between land protection, planning and zoning, and transportation planning. The land protection is really a tool to mitigate some of these growth management challenges, and conservation easements are an important tool because they do inherently reduce development rights. So recent easements that we've been a part of in Colleton and Hampton and Beaufort counties have reduced development rights by exponential amounts, 150 unit potential to 2 units ever with the conservation easement or something like that. Also want to commend the Green Space Advisory Board. I know that's required by the enabling legislation, which is an important requirement for accountability and civic expertise. But again, we have a track record with the Rural and Critical Program to ask those advisory board members to have relevant experience in estate law, finance, rural land ownership, agriculture. Believe that should carry forward to this advisory board as well. And then a couple of just comments on timing, making sure that this program is timed with the existing rural and critical program and with the state program. That's probably a discussion for a later date, but just to say that all of these funding sources and incentives can be complementary tools, and that's really important. So when setting an application process and deadline, keeping into account that rural and critical has a quarterly deadline, the State Conservation Bank has a July and January, and finding a balance in between the two would allow everything to work well together. And then lastly, the section on conservation easements. I'm really sorry.
Go ahead.
That conservation easements really are the preferred form of land protection, and this was noted repeatedly during the comprehensive plan, public meetings, and the green print surveys. They do, again, reduce development potential significantly, so I think when y'all talk about purchasing development rights, as you have in previous meetings, conservation easements are a really powerful tool to do that. But I will highlight that they really need to be negotiated by the grantee and the grantor because they have to be specific to the protected property. And I think the current structure allows or describes a slightly different process, but I think there's a thoughtful opportunity to review easement terms, recommend easement terms, but maybe not negotiate directly easement terms. That is something we do regularly on the land trust side. And I will say, prior to coming to the land trust, I assumed it was just kind of like an easy, let's just go negotiate a conservation easement. And my feeling such is my penance is tough easement negotiations because they are oftentimes highly personal to the landowner, but most importantly need to be specific to the conservation values of the property. So proposed a slight adjustment there. And again, just really hats off to your staff because these are comprehensive. It was done quickly, and I think should be recognized as an opportunity to build on a track record with the success we've had as a community and really create some trust between the taxpayer and the county with this new funding source. So I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, no? All right, we will head on into the agenda with number 7 being the subject of the public comment that we just had. Recommend approval of an ordinance to establish the Beaufort County Green Space Program ordinance subject to a referendum within Beaufort County pursuant to section 4-10-1010 of the Code of Laws of South Carolina, 1976, as amended. And Mr. Cavaney going to do this?
Tom and Rob and Mark Davis.
Okay. I hope everyone that's on the committee has looked at this draft and digested it. I think they did a wonderful job of taking a hard subject and making it understandable. I'll just leave it at that.
All right, and I think you all know the context of why we're here. You know, this is a requirement. Council decided to move forward with the referendum, and one of the requirements is that 2 weeks prior to holding the referendum, that council adopts an ordinance that outlines the methods of how the program would operate. And so that's what this document is. I wanted to start out just with kind of maybe a 20,000-foot view, kind of in the form of a timeline to kind of help understand the different sections of this. Assuming, or, you know, once we hear news of a successful referendum, the very first thing we would do is to appoint a Green Space Advisory Committee. That's something that is required in the state legislation and very specifically laid out, and then it's reflected in this ordinance. And, you know, in that time frame early on, there's going to be some heavy lifting, and that's kind of outlined in section 5 of this ordinance, where they are, first thing they would do is put together a group of stakeholders to assist in doing several things, trying to identify kind of geographically areas to target preservation or use of this program. The second would be to develop criteria for the program, you know, that would outline, you know, what are eligible or what are the requirements of the program, what are eligible purchases. And then the third would be a application and scoring criteria, to assist staff in evaluating applications. So all of that would need to be done in a relatively short time frame. The successful referendum, the assumption is in May of 2023, we'll start collecting the sales tax. So getting the program up and running as shortly after that is what we'll need to do. And all of those steps are crucial to that. The criteria and the application process, all of that will be submitted to county council for approval. Be prepared by the advisory committee, submitted to county council for approval, and then as required in the ordinance, that will be then sent to the Department of Revenue with the recommendation from this advisory committee to make sure that it is, I think the wording in the ordinance is that it is equitably distributed throughout the county. So, we're kind of defining what that means and hoping that we get the State Department's blessing. And from our understanding, from correspondence with the Attorney General and with, because this is a brand new program, that is the level of involvement the Department of Commerce wants to have with the program. They're not necessarily involved day to day. So I can real quickly kind of do a run through. Some of this, obviously it starts out with recitals, and I don't know that we need to go over that. Section 2, purpose. This requires kind of the general purposes of the program, and this language will assist whenever the advisory committee starts to develop program criteria. They'll draw from this, from this purpose statement. Section 3 are the types of acquisitions. This language is directly out of the state legislation. They listed A through F, and so we copied that per the legislation. And then section 4 talks about the advisory committee. Still, we're looking very closely at what the state legislation required. We added some language talking about terms of members, general language that we have for different boards. It's a public body. They'll conduct themselves in accordance with the South Carolina Ethics Act. And that, their businesses will be done in accordance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. So sections really up through 4, I think that's language that, I think we should all be comfortable with. It's pretty much mirroring, what is in the legislation. It's, in section 5 is really, this talks about that heavy lifting that I talked about earlier that will need to occur between the approval of the referendum and getting the program up and running. And so, under A, it talks about identifying a stakeholder groups with extensive knowledge and experience in land preservation to assist with the recommendations to the advisory committee on which areas and types of property to target for acquisition. We anticipate that this group will, one of the first duties of the Green Space Advisory Committee will be to appoint this group of stakeholders and identify those areas. In addition, they will develop the criteria. And if you notice, we list a few things. We kind of refer to this as staff as guardrails. It's kind of today passing an ordinance saying that when we do develop this criteria, we're going to these factors need to be part of that. So, first one is transparent and equally distributed within the county. That's language straight out of the ordinance. The second one is that for properties that are located outside the geographic boundaries of the county, that we may require matching funds. The third one is looking at any new entitlements to lands due to annexation, upzoning that occur after the adoption of this ordinance that we're going to very carefully scrutinize, and it may be restricted or prohibited. And part of that is a concern that, land might become artificially inflated, or, property owners might be looking for the best deal on their property and then go into the program. And obviously, if we're interested in the long-term viability of the program. We want to make sure that there's no abuse occurring in that way. And then finally, we want to make sure that if a property is located within a municipality or neighboring jurisdiction, that we have their letter of support or opposition as part of the application. We want to make sure that we're working in conjunction with their interests as well. The second part talks about the application process and scoring criteria. And what we're hoping to do is, once we have the program set up and what the criteria of the program are, we then want to be able to give staff who will be receiving and evaluating applications a pretty good method to do that, and relying on different criteria and whether it's meeting that criteria or not. So it's not just, so we have something that we're going forward once this gets to the Green Space Advisory Committee, that this project has been vetted and evaluated per the program guidelines. And so we, once again, to have some what we call the guardrails, just to give an idea of the kind of things that we believe are important when we develop that. The first one, of course, this is kind of all-encompassing, that the extent to which the acquisition will protect valuable natural resources, habitat, or water quality. The second is consistency with the comprehensive plan and green print plan. So we're tying it to the existing documents that we have that evaluate where the sensitive areas of the county are, and areas that would be where preservation would be appropriate. The third one is, and this is important if we're looking at purchase of development rights, is that the projects that are claiming, reduction of vehicle miles traveled, if that is an important factor of this, is that it will take future car trips off the road, that will reduce the need for future improvements. We want to have that documented. And so that's something that when we're developing these, we'll look at a way to make sure that, maybe a lot of trips will be reduced, but it's not in an area of the county where that really makes a difference. And so we want to make sure that that has been vetted before the project moves forward. The extent of which matching funds are available for applications, and also looking at how recently the property was entitled for development. In a similar way, kind of making sure that this is not part of that we're being very careful in where we're choosing to purchase development rights. And then once these are adopted, presented to council and adopted, then they go to Department of Revenue for their approval. And then that pretty much, once those are in place and the program is up and running, then we go to Section 6, which talks about how the program is run. This part should look very familiar to council, but basically staff reviews and evaluates applications. We've done all that heavy lifting, have the criteria, have the scoring system. That goes to the Green Space Advisory Committee. And they once again look at the staff recommendations, do their own scoring, and bring that forward to the Natural Resources Committee, who makes a decision about whether to move forward with the project for due diligence. Once that decision is made, they decide to go to due diligence, that occurs, and then the project once again goes through the process of evaluation to the committee, to Natural Resources, and then finally, and then also while due diligence, there's also contract negotiations or acquisition negotiations. That moves ahead to council, who has final, that they would adopt it by resolution. So that's really the meat of this document. We do have language that deals with, what the things we look for in due diligence and conservation easements. This language has been borrowed from the Rural and Critical Lands Ordinance, because it's, that seemed to be a very good model, and that has been refined over the years and how we address those concerns. But that is, in a nutshell, kind of a walk through the ordinance, and I guess with that, I'm willing to answer any
Okay,
questions.
we're opening it up for questions. I have some after everyone else has a chance. Yes, sir.
Here's my take on this. You have done a wonderful job presenting it to us. Now it's the education part for the community at large to determine if they're going to allow us to move forward. There's a very fine line between education and advocacy. We need to get the word out. We need to get the word out appropriately. I know that Kate, Jesse, their groups that they represent are on board with this and will help get that message out. We need to contact various other groups. I have done that, and those people are on board because I quote unquote educated them. They're going to be the advocates for it. I'm suggesting that we do a couple things. We need a summarization. I know that this is not an extensive document, but the idea is less is more. We need to be able to tell people exactly what we want to do with this in a short synopsis. I liken it to Cliff Notes. Second, we need to clearly talk about two things: the differences and the similarities with our existing rural and critical lands program. Because there are, I'm so sorry. I know that there are people that are out there that have already made up their mind without knowing the facts, and we have to tell them the facts. And then finally, we have to have a place where people can go to get information, probably our website, where if there was a video, if there was an audio, if there was bullet points, I think that's the educational opportunities we have. And the sooner we start this process, the better we're going to have success. So that's my input,
That's
Madam Chairman.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Councilman Somerville.
Yeah,
Go-
thank you very much. Sarah, could you put back up the portion of the rules that talks about equitable distribution within the county of the ordinance, please?
Oh, that would be, you mean in this ordinance, it would be section 5?
Five or four? Four, I thought it was four.
Oh,
Oh, there it is right there under 5B1, I think, that the program is transparent and equally
Yes.
distributes the funds within the county in the interest of, no, it's disappeared, in the interest of,
Beaufort County residents.
yeah, there you go. You know, when Tom Davis was with us, I asked him what that might mean, and you know, he didn't really give me much of an answer. I don't mean to be critical. He didn't say specifically what it means because nobody knows specifically what it means. But my concern, and I said it at the time, and I'm going to say it again, that is going to be fodder for the plaintiff's attorneys. I mean, there's so many. And I mean, we obviously have municipalities. We have 6 municipalities, obviously, but beyond that, we have entities. We have curtains. We have private communities. We have heaven only knows how many different entities or groups or we have east, south, north, and west. I mentioned that. I mean, it's so ambiguous that I just think it's just a matter of time before this becomes a litigation hotbed. I know it's in the statute, but I think bringing it forward as part of the ordinance is just asking for it. So my suggestion is take it out. I understand the logic. Well, it mirrors the statute. Yes, it does.
I-
We should want to hit the statute
I-
because
I don't think we
God only
can.
knows. God only knows what we're going to end up spending the money. I mean, what does it say does it say within Beaufort County? For Beaufort County residents, I mean, especially if somebody starts talking about spending it outside the county, then it's really going to get interesting. Even though the statute allows that. I mean, it almost contradicts itself. On one hand, it says it can be spent outside the county, and here it's saying it has to be for the benefit of the people in Beaufort County. So, I mean, that scares me. I mean, if the legal department and the consensus is to leave it in, then you're going to leave it in. I'm just giving a cautionary comment here that I think it's going to be a problem.
I'd like for Mr. Kevaney to speak to that, please.
Let me see if this is on. Is this on? So, Mr. Somerville, I understand your concerns, but we carefully included the language directly from the state act because we believe that we needed to do that. The committee can decide how it wants to affect that, and I think that's what will have to happen. But I really don't think we can run from it. I really think that in order for the methods to be published in the newspaper as the act requires, that we need to define the guardrails, and this is one of the guardrails, for better or worse. But I understand your point very well.
Yeah, I might add that
Thank you, Tom.
one of the ways, oh, I'm sorry.
I just said thank you.
Oh, we'll be determining, the committee will be determining early on what that means when they develop the criteria for the program, and that'll include the stakeholders. And, so that what that means will be explored a lot further when they start developing the criteria. And then ultimately, it goes to council and then to the Department of Commerce. And so, I think that we would say we have some cover if the state approves our method, our methods or the program criteria.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilman McAllen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't repeat things that other people have said that I agree with because I don't think it's necessary, and the things are well stated. I do think it's important as we are putting together the education program to let people know that this is not an either-or proposition, that it wasn't the green space instead of the transportation referendum. I think it has to be made clear that we intend to proceed with the beginning stages of the infrastructure improvement by obtaining funds that are coming to us through another source rather than through tax revenue, and that we intend to start the planning for the infrastructure improvements while the green space is in effect for the 2 years that it's operating. So I think a lot of people may be under the impression that we've abandoned the infrastructure plan and that we're only proceeding with this. And I think it's important that we present this in a way to let people know what we are actually doing with the initial stages of planning for the infrastructure installations while we are collecting the tax for the 2 years this ordinance will be active, so that when we finish with this, we will start the other. Because I think we may lose some voters here if they think we have substituted this for the other, and I don't want to have them have that impression as we move forward with the education program. Thank you.
So your suggestion, if I understand it correctly, is to include that in the synopsis of whatever's put out to the public?
Well, yeah, because I think if we don't, there will be a great many people who will say, I'm not going to support this because I believed in the other. Well, the other is proceeding in a parallel universe, and we are already going to be moving in the direction we need to initiate all of the infrastructure improvements that we need with a different funding source. And I think it's important to, once we get that commitment, I think it's important to include that in our educational efforts, so it doesn't become a choice for the voters to say either or. I think both should be moving, but they're moving in separate planes. That's all.
Of course.
Now, listen, that's just my opinion. Other people may say, forget it, not necessary, we don't have to mention it.
Okay.
But I'm afraid some people may say, I'm not supporting this because I believe the infrastructure is more important.
Well, only one will be on the ballot.
Well, that's exactly right.
Right.
They may just say, I'm not voting for it because I would have preferred the other.
Okay. Any comments from, that's a good comment, though. Okay.
Mr. McKillen, all I would say with regard to that is, you're right, they're running in parallel, and this one is much broader in scope than rule and critical, and that's a point that can be made.
True.
Yep.
Councilman Glover had a question, comment?
Probably both. Tom just talked about the.
Is your mic on? It's on, right?
Is it? I'm not too sure. Is it?
It's green. It's good.
It's green right here.
You're on.
Okay, I'm on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And the difference between the two programs, the Rural and Critical Land program and this program right here, they're both conservation program that could be on our website as conservation efforts in Beaufort County if this passes. The Rural and Critical Land for me is a county program. This will be a county program with the state tied to it. And I like the county's program because we control that a lot. The language in this puts it more at the state level. That could be changed at any time, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that you have in here in section 5, C2, and you reference plans, including our comp plan as well as our green print. To me, the way it's written here, the advisory group can include our green print, or they don't have to. I would like a little stronger language because a green print can be done by this advisory group, and if that happens, then we'll have 2 green prints out there. But I think the Rural and Critical Land has put together a good green inclusive print, and I think the language should be a little stronger. Not a sort of cursory kind of use of it, but that they basically follow as best they can our green print, which all will mean that if there's something outside of the green print, then they would bring it to council for approval because we have to approve everything anyway. But as a guide, I think the language should be a little stronger, that the comprehensive plan and the green print is something that we have gone over and that we have approved, and it's there. So they don't have to go out there and reinvent the wheel. It's there. The way it's written here is sort of cursory. That's how I read it and stuff. It may not be, but that's how I read it and stuff. And the other thing that I want to comment on is, because this is a state initiative, this is a state statute, at some point in time, we should have an end date for this thing so that if the money is not there, there is no need for a committee. That makes sense? It brings some closure to it, that we don't have a committee out there in perpetuity waiting for something to happen.
We do have an end date.
It does.
It is an end date for the committee?
Yes,
2
because
years.
the proposal is for a 2-year program to.
No, that's the funding part.
Right.
Right, but I don't, help me understand.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah, the
Well,
committee-
yes,
Yeah.
if we get $100 million,
Yes.
we're going to spend $100 million
In 2 years. Right.
probably in 2 years.
Right. Just bring an end to the committee.
No, I understand what you're saying. So there could be some methodology by which, when the $100 million is allocated, that's the end of that committee.
Unless there's more funding coming in from another penny sales. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, but just put some kind of ending, a closure to it. And,
Makes sense.
yeah, I would love some language in there to kind of help put the two programs in not in sync, but at least communicating with one another, so that they know what the other one is doing.
And I agree. You want to address that?
We talked about that, but there's really no way to do it. We envision Rule and Critical being stakeholders that will advise the committee on what areas they need to be targeting, but these are two separate and distinct programs, and there's really no way that one can be involved with the other. Now, Rule and Critical, if they can't take up an application for some reason because it doesn't fit well within their program, then they can refer that applicant to the Green Space Committee and have the Green Space Committee evaluate that application based on its merits underneath that particular program. We also talked about having time frame in the language for the committee to end, or what happens in the case a referendum is not successful. We decided to stay silent on that, because once you adopt this method, and if the referendum is not successful this time, you don't have to worry about doing this if you want to do the green space referendum question at some point in the future. It'll be an ordinance that exists, but if there's no funding or no activity necessary, then it'll just lie dormant.
So it's kind of like a board or commission that has no activity to take forward, but they still are on the
Well,
board.
the ordinance will exist, but without the referendum, you don't have to appoint a committee.
What about, I see York's point about the money, though. If, the end of the $100 million,
Right.
what happens to this? Then the ordinance could be,
Then you all could vote to disband the committee through an appropriate process at that point in time based on the makeup of that council.
okay, got it. What, you have any other questions?
Kind of like we did with the beautification board.
Right. Councilman Glover, you have any other questions?
Well, you answered the question that not to my satisfaction, so I better not ask any more questions, but go ahead.
No, that's why we're talking about it. I see your point about stronger language about consistency with adopted plans. I don't know if we could add any stronger language to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, just looking at this, one thought would be in section 5, when we talk about the stakeholders targeting land for acquisition, we could say in consistent with the green print and comprehensive plan, or something tying those two documents to recognize that they are governing documents with.
Instead of just nice to do.
You may-
I mean, I see your point.
Yeah.
This is like, if there's no other questions from others, I had a couple of kind of down in the weeds
So can I elaborate on the comprehensive plan thing? We need to be careful with that language in this particular method, because there might be times when council might determine that it's in the best interest of the community and the public good to acquire a piece of property that may not be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Say we're calling for intense development in an area that someone for environmental reasons may not desire to have that property developed and may want the application to consider. I'm not saying that is a major concern, because the comp plan is just a guide, but you certainly don't want to open yourself up to potential litigation by saying we're going to do something in compliance with the comprehensive plan, because there might be times down the road where we may have to make decisions that are not in the best interest of the comp plan, because the comp plan may not have envisioned something occurring that the council in office at that time does not want to see happen.
consistency with it? Would that be strong?
We'll play around with the language and have something for you before the 12th.
Okay. The other, in that same section 5, when we, going back to your comment about reduction of vehicle miles, which was a huge point to some members of council, are you going to require a traffic study for everybody that makes an application or not?
And that's something that
I mean,
we'll
I'm just-
figure out once the advisory committee is up and running and develops
Okay.
that criteria. But, if their big selling point for a purchase of development rights is that it will reduce future traffic and negate the need for an improvement, then I think,
we could
we're
require
going to
it.
want some documentation to show that.
In particular, I'm thinking of some of these larger PUDs that want to reduce. How much do they have to reduce to actually reduce the miles? That may be the only attraction of buying their development rights. So, okay,
Yeah, and-
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and that'll be,
We can decide that later.
that's part of the scoring system. So it could be that land has conservation values, but the reduction of vehicle miles traveled is not that great. It may balance out, but that's, if that's kind of what somebody's banking on is they're, meeting the criteria of the program, then we're going to want to know that it's actually going to deliver.
Okay. Going to section 6 on the due diligence and the other things brings up a question that we talked about already, but I just wanted to go on record. Can we use this money from the 1 cent sales tax? I think I know the answer. Can we use this money to be used to staff support and due diligence? It's my interpretation, we can.
Yes.
Because this is going to take time and effort by staff.
Yes.
To score these projects. It's going to take due diligence. We know that costs money.
If this referendum is successful, this will be a full-time job.
Okay, and we can use it for all
Yeah.
these extra costs like due diligence and
That's correct.
things like. Would it be incumbent on the landowner to do like the traffic studies though? And review by staff?
Committee will make that.
They make that decision when the time comes? Okay, that's the only questions I had. So are there anybody else think of some other questions? Councilman Somerville, Councilman McKellen?
I do.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Councilman Glover?
No, yeah, go up there first.
Either one of you? They're not raising their hand. Go ahead.
Oh, let me I want to make sure I understand something Mr. Greenway just said. Because he said it in the reverse order for me. If there's a project that the rural and critical land think could be funded through this program here, they would forward that over to this committee to do, right, to fund, after they have done their investigation or whatever and stuff, so that, because we are not creating a program here that will replace rural and critical land program, is it?
Not initially.
Not initially,
No, not initially.
but ultimately.
Well, I think if you adopt a 1 cent sales tax to raise $100 million for green space acquisition, I think you're going to be hard pressed in the future once you spend the total of $25 million in this bond to convince the voters to add an additional property tax on top of them to fund future rural and critical lands acquisitions. The intent of what we've done here is not to harm or end the rural and critical lands program. I just think from a professional standpoint that it's going to be very unlikely if you have $100 million that you're going to be able to convince voters in the future to add an additional bond referendum through property tax to be paid back through property taxes to acquire open space through rural and critical lands. So I think the eventuality will be that the rural and critical lands program could very well go away once the existing bond money is spent. If this referendum is successful. Let me make sure it's clear. I'm not saying that that's what I want to see happen. I'm just telling you that as a professional planner and the role that I play now, I see that could very likely be the response of the taxpayers if you put a future bond referendum in front of them that would continue funding the rural and critical land program. So that would be an unintended, this referendum could have the unintended consequence of ultimately ending the rural and critical land program.
As it exists.
Necessarily the program, but as it exists. Because at the end of 2 years, there will be a determination of going forward yet again with a referendum or some other means and method. And we won't know that until 3 things happen. Number 1, obviously the voters will have to say yes. Number 2, we will have to collect $100 million within a 2-year period of time or whatever. And number 3, we'll have to see the success or failure of what the committee was desirous of doing and were they able to accomplish that. All of that is unknown at this point in time.
I agree. I understand that. And I would argue right now that it is so crucial that we tie the two together so that that doesn't happen. And I say that because I really, as a community, I put more trust in the community than I do at the state. And I would hate to see that, Mr. Greenway, what you just said, happen. Because when it's all said and done, I think the 2 programs can work together. They have 2 different functions, separate functions, but they can work together. But when the dust settles, after all the funds, I think this community will still support the rural and critical land program because it's a local program. That's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that the state's involvement is really in that first stage of setting up the program criteria, the lands to be targeted for preservation, and the scoring and all that. Once that is approved, then it really is a locally run program, the way that this is set up.
The state,
I understand that, but the state also controls the statute and the law itself that can always change at the state level. That's all I'm saying.
that's true.
Yeah, I agree with you, what you're saying, and that's
Yeah, I just
on
wanted-
the surface, yes, but it is still a state initiative, and they still control the law and the language. That's all. Thank you.
Comment to that? York, you're absolutely right. We're the pioneers
Yeah,
because we already have
a program.
program in place that no other county has, which is why the state is coming to us.
Well, Charleston does.
Pioneers of setting up what we're going to set up with the possibility that once we do that, it's a roadmap, it's a blueprint for other counties now to come in and set up a program.
I agree.
But Charleston has a program.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
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 No, I agree.
In the state.
You know, there's an old saying in South Carolina is, well, we only safe as long as the legislator's not in session. Yeah, okay. So,
Today I was at the Land Use Committee meeting for South Carolina Association of Counties, and the chairman of that is from Sumter County. He is very concerned about the loss of farmland in the state of South Carolina, as we all are. And, the Rural and Critical Lands Program was part of its tenets was to do that. But Sumter County only has their land use and their zoning ordinances to protect their farmland. And I think all the counties are looking at
do
different
something. Sure.
tools, how to
sure.
do this.
And I agree.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I don't know if anybody would know, but how much money is left in the bank with the Rural and Critical Lands Program? And Are they under any kind of a mandate with regard to how soon they must?
13, eh?
25.
We have approximately $15 million left in that account, and no, they are under no mandate as to how quickly they have to spend it.
So if they're providing assistance to us to point out or to identify things that we can purchase with the money that's collected in this referendum and this ordinance, they can provide that assistance to us, and we can spend that money with their direction and guidance, which means they don't have to spend their money. And then they will have that money available to them to stay in business with whatever money they have left, well past the time that we spend our money. But I can't even imagine how many years it's going to take us to spend $100 million if it's taken all this time to simply spend $10 million. So I don't think anybody's at any risk of going out of business, quite frankly. And I would like to see us utilize their expertise going forward to help us determine what would be the best course of action for us with regard to purchasing properties, and allow them, if they find something that they're interested in that we're not, to use their resources as well, not to the point of spending them all, but helping us spend ours before they spend theirs. And that way they'll stay in business and we'll stay in business, and we'll have a very good relationship for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so at this point, we need a motion to move it forward to full council with some of the changes we're going to look at, maybe, okay?
Be very happy to make the motion that we approve the language in item number 7, which is to recommend the ordinance
With
to
maybe,
full council.
okay, with,
I'll second, Madam Chairman.
okay, does anyone want to add the one part that we wanted to look at?
Yes, so they've heard clearly that it's the desire
We can look at it.
massage the ordinance as we have presented in this meeting.
We need you all to make a recommendation today in order to keep us on track from a
Right.
time standpoint.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second to move it forward.
Yes.
If there's no dissent, everyone in favor, no objection? All right, we're moving it forward. Thank you. Thank you very much. A lot of hard work. We appreciate that. All right, we have one more item in open session, which is recommend approval appointment of Glenn Miller to the Planning Commission for a partial term appointment with an expiration date of February 2023.
I will make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Without objection, that will move forward to full council. We have several items for executive session, and we probably will have things to come out of executive session. I'll read those. Number 9 is discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of development rights on real property. That is Lucy Creek, to do due diligence. Number 10 is discussion of negotiations incident on proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale of or purchase of development rights on real property, Davis Road, due diligence. Number 11 is discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of development rights on real property, Highway 278, due diligence. And number 12 is discussion and negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale or purchase of development rights on real property, Great Swamp, due diligence. I have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I'll second, Madam Chairman.
All right. Without objection, we will go into executive session in the other room, and there probably, more than likely, will be some matters arising out of that. Okay? Thank you. out of executive session, and we do have some matters arising out of executive session. We will start with number 10 on the, oh, 9, yeah, 9, okay. 9 is a discussion of negotiations for Lucy Creek due diligence. Do I have a motion?
You do, Madam Chairman. I move that we move forward with due diligence on possible purchase of development rights on the Lucy Creek property, which we discussed in executive session.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Councilman Glover. Without objection, we will go forward on Lucy Creek due diligence. Number 10 is discussion of negotiations on the property for development rights due diligence Davis Road. Do we have a motion to that?
Madam Chairman, I motion that we pursue due diligence on property known as Davis Road, as recommended by the staff.
And I will second the motion.
Okay, without objection, we will move forward with due diligence for the property on Davis Road. Number 11 is discussion of negotiations for property contractual arrangements, proposed sale or development rights on property at Highway 278. Do I have a motion? We have a motion on that one? That was to either go forward or not with due diligence?
The proper terminology is that we will take the recommendation of the Rural and Critical Lands Board to not move forward with due diligence.
That's a motion.
That's your
my
motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second, madam. Okay.
All right, second by Councilman Glover. Without objection, we will not be pursuing that. Number 12, discussion of negotiations for contractual arrangements and proposed sale or PDR rights on real property named Great Swamp. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chairman, I motion that we approve the recommendation of staff and the Rural and Critical Land Program that denied the purchase of this property.
Due diligence. We're not-
Yes.
Okay. We have a second?
Second.
All right. Without objection, that motion is passed. And those are all our matters arising out of executive session, and our chairman would like to make an announcement
Yes.
for the public's information.
Yeah, for the public, today, our Vice Chairman Gerald Dawson lost his wife, and it was with great sadness that we announced the passing of his wife, Vivian.
Okay. We hope everyone has their family in your thoughts and prayers in the coming days. Without any other business, we are adjourned. Thank you.